Hello there. We'll continue with our lesson on the topic reproduction, but today we'll be looking at reproduction of unicellular organisms. Now, the objective of today's lesson is to help learners describe the reproduction of certain unicellular organisms such as amoeba, Spirogyra, and PARAMECIUM. Now, first and foremost, we'll be looking at the reproduction in amoeba. We'll be looking at reproduction in amoeba. Now, when amoeba reaches full size, it stops moving. It divides into two by binary fission. The nucleus first divides into two equal parts, then follows the division of the cytoplasm. Now, after the completion of the division of the cytoplasm, two daughter amoebae are formed. Now, another method of reproduction is multiple fission or spore formation. During an adverse condition, amoeba becomes rounded and secretes around itself a cyst. Inside the cyst, the nucleus divides several times. When conditions become favorable, the cyst bursts and each nucleus is surrounded by a part of the cytoplasm of the parent. In this way, many small amoebae are formed. Now, this is the pictorial representation of binary fission and multiple fission in amoeba. Now, starting with a full-grown amoeba with the pseudopodia and nucleus. In binary fission, the amoeba stops moving and the pseudopodia is retracted and the nucleus divides by mitosis. In other words, the nucleus will divide first, followed by the cytoplasm, which will produce two daughter cells. Here, the daughter nuclei separates and the cytoplasm constricts, which you see right here, producing two identical daughter amoeba cells. But in multiple fission, when the environmental condition is unfavorable, the amoeba will reproduce through multiple fission. Now, in the process, you can see that the pseudopodia retracts as well. The amoeba stops moving and the amoeba secretes a cyst wall, as you can see right here. And under a period of time, there is mitotic division of amoebic cells. In other words, the parent amoeba will produce various numbers of daughter cells within the cyst. So when the condition is favorable again, the cyst will rupture and release many daughter amoebas, as you can see in the picture right here. Now, moving along, we'll be looking at reproduction in PARAMECIUM. Now, PARAMECIUM reproduces in two ways. These are asexual reproduction, that is through binary fission, and sexual reproduction through conjugation. PARAMECIUM, just like amoeba, reproduces by binary fission. Here, the parent organism simply divides into two parts, which is a mitotic division, each of which can exist by itself. Now, PARAMECIUM occasionally reproduces by sexual means, particularly when the cell is exposed to stressful conditions. Now, this is the pictorial representation of binary fission in PARAMECIUM. So, as you can see, we start from one cell which divides mitotically to produce two exact copies of daughter paramecium. Now, this is the pictorial representation of conjugation in PARAMECIUM. Now, as you can see right here, two paramecia of opposite mating types come in contact by ventral surface. Now, they unite to form conjugates, as you can see right here. Now, what happens next is that their micronucleus disintegrates. The micronucleus undergoes two subdivisions, one of which is a reduction division. Now, as you can see right here, three nuclei disintegrates and the macronucleus of one of the conjugates fuse with the pronucleus of another conjugate, as you can see in this picture, which will lead to the formation of zygote nucleus that you can see here. Now, moving along, the conjugates separate to form exoconjugates. Now, these exoconjugates go through 3 successive divisions to produce 8 nuclei, as you can see right here. Once the 8 nuclei is formed, 3 of them disintegrate, and the mitotic division of micronucleus takes place, forming 2 daughter paramecium. Now the micronucleus further subdivides, creating 4 paramecium that you can see right here, and this other conjugate also goes through the same process. Now moving along, we'll be looking at reproduction in Spirogyra through the process of conjugation. Now Spirogyra carries out a type of sexual and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, known as conjugation, is the one that we'll be looking at right here. The cells of 2 filaments come to lie side by side. 2 opposite cells bring forth protrusions. Now these protrusions elongate and eventually meet to form conjugation tube. At this point, the content of 2 cells are regarded as gametes, usually male and female gametes. The male gamete passes through the conjugation tube to meet the female gamete. In that process, the two fuse, forming a zygote. The zygote secretes a thick resistance wall around itself and is now known as zygospore. Now the parent cell wall decays to release the zygospore, which can be blown away by the wind or sink to the bottom of a pond. After a period of rest and conditions are favorable, the outer coat bursts and a young filament grows out. As you can see right here, you have 2 filaments coming side by side, and conjugation tubes now develop, as you can see right here. So you can see the protrusion here will form conjugation tube. Now the conjugation canal forms, that means the space whereby the male will fuse itself with the female gamete. Now in the 4th process here, the male gamete fuse with the female gamete to form zygote. So you can see these are the zygotes being formed right here when the male and the female fuse together. Now right here you can see this is a pictorial representation of the germination in zygospore of Spirogyra. Now once the cyst is formed, now you have within the zygote you have a diploid nucleus which will divide to form haploid nuclei. Now these 3 of the 4 nuclei will disintegrate, which will cause one of the nucleus to form a new filament which will come out of the zygospore once it bursts, and once the condition is favorable, a new filament will be formed that way, as you can see right here in the picture. Now finally we'll be looking at the process of asexual reproduction in Spirogyra through fragmentation. Now in this process, a part of an organism breaks up or fragments are formed and give rise to a new individual. This is a form of regeneration. In Spirogyra, when a filament reaches a certain length, parts of it break away and grow into new filaments. This type of reproduction in Spirogyra is a sexual reproduction, as you can see right here. Now you can see that fragments are formed right here where there's a break here at the septa, which will form 2 fragments, and these 2 fragments will grow eventually into new separate organisms, new separate individual organisms with time. Now with this, we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now let's take a quick look at the summary. Reproduction in amoeba is of 2 types, binary fission and multiple fission. Reproduction in PARAMECIUM is both sexual and asexual. Sexual reproduction is through conjugation, while the sexual reproduction is through binary fission. Now reproduction in Spirogyra is both sexual and asexual. Sexual reproduction is through conjugation, while the sexual reproduction is through fragmentation. Now before we go, I want you to pause this video and attempt to answer this multiple choice question to see how much of the lesson that you have imbibed. And I'll see you again in the next lesson. Bye bye.